Well, we're 3 weeks away from Easter. We've hit the final transition in John's Gospel, where the narrative turns to the final moments, the final days of Jesus' life. And over the next couple of weeks on the lead up to Easter, we're journeying through Jesus' last days as he approaches the cross. This story is often really familiar to all of us, right? We know this story if we've been around the church at all. But I always think it's really hard in this story to understand the intensity and the emotions and the tension of the scenes. I think partly, we don't typically take enough time to actually imagine what it was like to be there and imagine the tension that they felt and the emotions and the pain and the fear and the disillusionment that the disciples would be walking in. I think that's part of it. I think on the other side of it, we don't understand the heinousness of our sin. And so when it comes to our own sin, we don't often see ourselves as the failing people in the story. We like to think we're a bit better than that. So we don't enter into the scene enough. We don't understand the heinousness of our sin enough. And that means we don't fully grasp what's going on in the story as we read it. So today it was a longer reading. It's a series of scenes that are painting a stark contrast between the disciples and how they behave and Jesus and his absolute faithfulness. So what I want to do this morning is take some time to look at ourselves in the story and the ways that we tend to look a lot with and can identify with the failures of the disciples as we read this part of the Passion Week story. So scene one is Judas, his betrayal, or what we could call our betrayal. Let's remember for a moment, Jesus is one of the 12. Judas is one of the people that Jesus has chosen to do life with, to travel with for 3 years, to invest in, to teach. Judas was handpicked by Jesus. I also think the reason we're told that Jesus goes up on a mountainside and spends all night praying as he chooses his disciples is because he knows he has to choose Judas. I think it probably took him 10 minutes to pick his disciples and the rest of the night to argue with God whether picking Judas was the right thing or not because of what this would lead to. Judas in this story takes these people to, this is the kicker for me. The Garden of Gethsemane, the passage tells us, is somewhere that Jesus meets regularly with his disciples. It's a place of intimacy for the disciples. It's a place where Jesus retreats with them to have alone time with Jesus. That's the place. That place of intimacy is the place that Judas is going to lead a whole bunch of people as he betrays this person that he's followed for 3 years, who handpicked him, who's walked in him, with him, who has blessed him. Judas betraying Jesus. Every time I get to this part of the story, I just find myself going, how? How could he do this? Maybe you're like, oh, it makes perfect sense. I'm like, how? How can someone this close to Jesus betray him so spectacularly? I don't like that thought because I like to think I'm someone that's trying to chase Jesus. And if I can be close to Jesus, does that mean I have the possibility of betraying him just as spectacularly? It's scary. It brings us to what is really a soul-searching, soul-penetrating thought. Proximity to Jesus is not the same thing as surrender to Jesus. Proximity to him is not the same thing as being surrendered to him. I think a lot of us do things that bring proximity, but I don't know how much we're actually walking in full surrender to the things that he asks of us. Judas' betrayal is not something that happens overnight. He doesn't just wake up this day and decide he's going to betray Jesus. Betrayal happens as we gradually replace our love for that person and our desire for something else. And what are some of those things? Spiritual activity, right? We can be around Jesus. We can attend church, read the Bible occasionally, hang out with Christians, attend worship events, go to Alpha, go on mission trips, but do it all without submitting to him. We can do it all to get close to the idea of him, but not actually give ourselves in submission to him. We have proximity without surrender. Some of us, it's shifting allegiance. We gradually shift our allegiance away from Jesus, where we start pursuing him for things that we can get from him. I want the security or the identity or the morality or the influence or the sense of belonging, so I'm putting my allegiance there instead of with you. It can be allegiance to our church as an organization or a denomination or our politics. There are so many ways that we can shift allegiance away from Jesus and onto something else. And it happens gradually over time and eventually leading us to betray him with the ways that we live, the things that we say. And betrayal happens through a series of small compromises. It's rarely one big one, but it's the allowing of bitterness in our hearts. It's the sense of entitlement that we walk in. It's the secret sin that we harbor and hold on to, or the unresolved anger that we allow to sit inside. And sometimes, actually, on the other side of it, it's the shattered expectations that lead us to the place of betrayal. It's disappointment over time that Jesus hasn't given me what I wanted. It's the unresolved suffering in our lives. It's the unanswered prayer that makes me begin to lose hope and question his goodness and open my heart to be the kind of person that could betray him like Judas. Proximity to Jesus is not the same as surrender. We've got to ask ourselves and examine in ourselves, am I pursuing him and submitting myself fully? Or have I bought into proximity without the depth of intimacy that is offered to me? Am I tasting and am I seeing that he is good? Or am I just turning up at the buffet and looking at it instead of actually tasting what he has on offer? Just like Judas, if we're not careful, we will betray Jesus. Another way we find ourselves in the story is in part 2 of this scene, where you've got Peter and Malchus, and it's Peter's rashness in the moment that I often don't think we stop to see in ourselves. This is about his misdirected zeal. Jesus, I love you and I'm going to protect you. Let me chop off someone's ear. I love when I read things and they start to how does that actually happen? He just chops off the ear. Probably wearing a helmet, tries to get the guy in the head, slides down the head, takes his ear off, lands on his shoulder. I don't know. But misdirected zeal that said, I got to protect this guy. I've got to fight for Jesus because somehow Jesus can't fight for himself. It's that misdirected zeal that says, I have to be in control. I can't trust God to have this. I got to take control. So I've got to manipulate circumstances. I give in to impatience and just run ahead of what Jesus is asking me to do. I've got to force the outcome. I don't want to take the time to discern. So I'm just going to decide and I'm going to do it whether it's right or not. Misdirected zeal. Sometimes, some of us in the room, right, you may be a little bit more emotionally reactive. The rashness is someone says something or does something or Jesus asks something of you and you have that automatic, visceral response. That is our rash response to the things of Jesus. I think most of us are walking in spiritual rashness than we realize. And it often looks like, oh, hey, Scotty, I'd like you to do this thing this week. We're like, ain't going to do that. I've got a better idea. I don't want to give control of that. I'm going to do something else instead. Sometimes we're betraying Jesus. Sometimes we're running in rashness, acting ahead of Jesus. Or sometimes we're more like Peter in the story, where it's our denial of who he is and what he's asking us to do. Have you ever stopped with Peter? This moment, a little girl comes up to him. He's scared of a little girl. I'm always like, okay. This little girl comes up. Are you one of the disciples? Have you ever stopped to wonder, why? Why Peter in that moment when a little girl asks him, why? He says, I don't know. I don't know. Have you spent time there? Maybe. I don't know. I find myself wondering, is he seeing big picture? Jesus has predicted his death. So if I identify as being with Jesus, then I'm basically signing a death warrant for myself. So is it self-preservation? Is it fear of pain or repercussion? This isn't going to go very well for him. He said death. I don't want the pain that he's going to walk into. I found myself wondering as I sat in John's version of this. At one point, he's around the fire, and it says there's a person there who's the family of the guy whose ear he cut off. And it's like, weren't you in the garden earlier? I wonder if part of the denial is actually Peter realizing the implication of his rashness. I acted and I cut this guy's ear off. It's not just identification with Jesus, but if I say I'm with them, they're going to realize that I'm the guy that cut their friend's ear off, and that's not going to go well for me. Often when we act rashly, it's not till later that we figure it out. And unfortunately, rash decisions can often lead to us denying the things that Jesus requires of us. How do we deny Jesus today? We stay silent about our faith or about Jesus or about our participation in church. It's when we go into certain situations and we downplay our spirituality. When you see someone attractive that you're interested in and you don't want to let them know you're a Christian because that might spoil the fun before it starts. When you're applying for a job and they ask you a question, you don't want to let them know about church because if I let them know I'm a Christian, perhaps I won't get the job, so I'll just stay quiet right now because getting this job is more important than being bold in obedience to Jesus. Sometimes we deny Jesus by allowing ourselves to engage in behaviors that we know we should not be engaging in. And you know it, like, you know, the tongue ones are always the easiest ones for us to get right. You know it when you say, don't know if I should be telling you this, but, right? I want to tell you this story, but I don't know if this is mine to tell. But I trust you, and I know you're not going to tell anyone. So, you know, we know those things where I shouldn't be doing this, but I do it anyway. We all know those things that we've given into or told ourselves that we're not going to do, and we do it anyway. We deny Jesus every time we permit those things to happen in our lives. And we say, I love Jesus, I care about Jesus, but actually, do we really? Because just like Peter, when the opportunity presents itself, we're too quick to deny him and give ourselves over to other things. Judas and Peter in the story are what in literary terms we call foils. So they're contrasting characters. So they're weaved in at this part of the story by John in a way that highlights the difference between their unfaithfulness and the faithfulness of Jesus. Just like them, every day of our lives, we are giving into unfaithfulness. Every day of our lives, we're betraying Jesus, we're denying Jesus, we're being rash in the things that we do. And every day, we are foils in the story of salvation, setting up the contrast between our unfaithfulness and the faithfulness of Jesus. I remember 17, 18 years old being at it was a weekend camp that was a leadership development thing for an Christian organization I was part of called Scripture Union. And there was a lady who was involved in the Church of Scotland that was teaching us about leadership, and she did it by walking through 2 Timothy. And I, to this day, I remember where I was sitting. I remember the face of the lady that was speaking. I remember very few other details about the weekend. But I remember when we got to this part in 2 Timothy and she read this passage about the character of Jesus, that even if we are unfaithful to him, he remains faithful to us because he cannot deny who he is. Faithfulness is his character. Faithfulness is his nature. He cannot deny it. The verse was so unbelievable to me at that time that it embedded itself out of shock so deeply in the core of my being. And it's been 20 more years of trying to figure out that verse and see it work out in my heart. Jesus' ultimate faithfulness, despite our daily betrayals and rashness and denial of who he is. I want to look briefly at some of the ways in John 18 that we see the faithfulness of Jesus. I think that we need to be reminded of as we're walking through the end of Lent, and we're at the part of the story that's the hardest for us to swallow because it exposes our sin the most, and as we get ready to celebrate the hope of the resurrection. So let me look very briefly. A couple of ways in the passage we see his faithfulness. The first one is this: Jesus being fully in control in the midst of chaos. I don't know if we always pick this up as we read. Jesus knowing what was going to happen. We already know that Jesus knows at the Last Supper. We know Jesus knows that Judas is about to betray him. Jesus deliberately heads to a place that he knows Judas will know he's there. And Jesus is not surprised when Judas turns up with these people that are ready to take him. Jesus goes there intentionally, purposefully willing himself toward the suffering that's about to come. Then when he's there and Judas arrives with some of the religious leaders and some of the Roman soldiers, he doesn't hang out with his disciples in hiding and wait for them to come looking for him. He goes out to them, knowing what's about to happen. He walks out to the people that are going to try and take him and says, "Who is it you want?" I'm like, when they say Jesus of Nazareth, do they not know who's standing in front of them? Like, where have they been for 3 years is what I want to know. Jesus of Nazareth, they said. "I am he," Jesus says. And Judas the traitor was standing there with him. When Jesus said, "I am he," they all drew back and fell to the ground. So knowing Judas would betray him, he went to Gethsemane anyway. Knowing they were coming to arrest him, he initiated the conversation. And then knowing, like a little bit later in the story, right? Knowing that they're going to try and trick him with a farce trial and catch him up and try and trip him out. Knowing that they were going to trick him in trial, Jesus just confidently asserts his ministry. "I've preached in public. If you've got issues, ask anyone that heard me." Like, Jesus is fully in control of the situation. So while we're reading the Gospel of John and it looks like the story is spiraling out of control, while you are following Jesus in your own life and it may look like or feel like the story is spiraling out of control, Jesus is 100% in control of everything that is happening. Jesus, we've seen him emotional. We've seen him like in the Garden of Gethsemane, like you see it in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We've seen him crying, tears of blood, asking God to find any other way to accomplish what he's going to accomplish without the cross. But even there, Jesus is the one leading the events. Jesus is the one leading forward. Jesus is the one initiating the pathway to the cross. This is not people taking him by surprise. This is not the difficulty of the world or the brokenness of systems getting the better of Jesus. Jesus is systematically walking with boldness towards what is coming. Jesus is fully in control in the midst of all the chaos. And the chaos of the world around you, and perhaps in the chaos of what you're feeling inside of you, Jesus is faithful and he is fully in control. Little side note and a little quote here from a scholar. When Jesus is saying, I am he, he's using a term in Greek that is the Greek translation of what they use in the Old Testament whenever it says God is I am. So he says, ego eimi. This is what one of the writers says, Andrew Lincoln. Thinking about Jesus saying, I am he, and everyone falling around him. He says, this is the typical human reaction to theophany. What's theophany? It's when God appears. For a moment, the true status of the characters in the narrative is graphically depicted. The ultimate powerlessness of the masked representatives of this world's powers, the Roman forces, the Jewish guards, and the disciple-turned-betrayer is revealed as they have to retreat and prostrate themselves in the presence of the unique divine agent who is one with God. This amazing moment. Jesus just isn't, who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. He isn't like, hey, that's me. He's like, I am. And in that moment, he makes a declaration that he is God in the flesh, and the only thing people can do is fall on their knees before him. And that's the story at the end, right? A day is coming where those who love Jesus are going to fall on their knees before him. But it says every knee will bow and every tongue confess. All those people that reject him will fall on their knees before him, seeing who he is. They're going to confess that he's Lord, but there's going to be two different judgments for us, for those who have put our faith in him and those who haven't. Jesus walking with purpose toward Good Friday. Jesus' faithfulness is also seen in the way he protects his people. Jesus asked them, who is it you're looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. Well, it's me. And if it's me you're looking for, then let everyone else go. It's amazing that in a moment like that, he's thinking about the people round about him. Based on the fact that there's a number of soldiers, not just the Jewish leaders, there's a number of soldiers that have been brought with Judas, we can make the assumption that they're not just there for Jesus. They might be assuming the disciples are going to fight on their behalf, but they're bringing enough force to take all of them. I wonder if they're planning to arrest the whole lot of them. Jesus reveals his divinity, making clear who he is to the people and the disciples. Then he does this thing. It's kind of like he sort of asks, but he actually commands. Like, you're looking for me, let them go. Let my people go. Sounds like anything else in Scripture. As Moses goes to Pharaoh, let my people, let them go. Jesus is protecting the church. If these people in this moment took Jesus and all the disciples, chances are they would all have been crucified. And then 3 years of ministry goes down the drain because they can't carry the work of Jesus forward. In this moment, Jesus is protecting his people. Let them go. Making sure that he's front and center. Making sure by this divine declaration that makes them fall on their knees, the eyes are off of everyone else and just on him. Because now they can leave. He's going to walk towards his death. And these people are left behind to carry his message and birth the church and do what has happened for the last 2,000 years to lead us to sit in these seats today. God is still in the business of interceding for his people, drawing attention to himself, working on our behalf so that he can use us to do his work as he walks through the world. Jesus is faithful. Jesus' faithfulness is seen in staying sinless despite temptation and pain. Why do I go here? Jesus knows our pain. Hebrews 4:15. We don't have a high priest who's unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who's been tempted in every way just as we are, yet he did not sin. I wanted to stop for a moment. I focused on our betrayal and our denial of Jesus and our rashness. But what about the moments, maybe some of you feel this way right now, where you feel betrayed or denied by someone, or perhaps even more, that you feel betrayed or denied by him? We've betrayed him. He knows what it feels like to be betrayed. He knows what it feels like to be denied. But some of us sitting in the room feel betrayed by Jesus. Like, I followed you and you've not given me what I wanted. I feel like you're denying me. I'm pleading with you for things and you're not giving me what I want, and we feel denied. Jesus knows what it is to be betrayed and let down. Jesus knows what it's like to shed tears of blood because he's looking at the cost in front of him and thinks it's too high. Jesus faithfully intercedes for us as one who knows the pain, the confusion, the loneliness, the isolation that we feel. And that means there's a strange unity that we have with him in our moments of betrayal or denial. And a strange power that he has as he intercedes from a place of deeper knowledge. And lastly, how's Jesus seen as faithful? With Jesus, failure is not final. He always redeems it all. We'll look at it in a few weeks, right? John 21, there's this moment of redemption of Peter as he's denied Jesus, this moment of invitation. Now, if you think about how this story goes, there's been flames throughout the story today. So you have this moment where the soldiers come in with their flaming torches. And in the darkness, by torchlight, Judas betrays Jesus. By that torchlight in the darkness, Peter reaches out and chops off Malchus' ear. We get to the point in the courtyard where by campfire, there's a fire there, and Peter's by the fire. By the light of that fire, Peter denies that he knows Jesus. But then we're going to see in John 21 a different fire where Jesus comes to Peter and doesn't bring up the denial, doesn't bring up the betrayal, but just looks at him and says, "Do you love me?" Like, I love you in spite of everything that's happened, but do you love me? The story is of the gospel, the story that John is helping us see, and we're walking up to Good Friday with it. The story of the gospel is not that we never fail Jesus. It's not that we never betray him, that we never deny him, that we're never rash in the things that we do. The story is not that we never fail him, but that he never gives up on disciples when they fail. And that he's always working in the background, behind the scenes, to bring us to a place of full redemption. Jesus is faithful. We are not. But praise Jesus that even though we are unfaithful, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. I'm going to invite the band to come up and lead us in some songs at the end. And I want to kind of offer an invitation. I didn't tell Sam and Megan you're going to pray for people. But Aaron, I'm going to have Aaron pray for people too. In pre-service prayer, as we're praying, and we're feeding back what we sensed God was saying, Aaron had this moment where he's like, I just need to tell you that for the last couple of weeks, I feel an unnaturally high level of faith. And so it was like, great, we need that. So I said to Aaron, if you're feeling it, what he said, I feel an unnaturally high level of faith. If you need it, I'd like to give some of it to you. And so I said, well, let's at the end of the service when we're worshiping, have him pray and impart that to us. So maybe you're here and you feel like faith is waning a little bit and you would like a little impartation of an unnaturally strong faith, and Aaron's going to pray for you. I'm going to have Sam and Megan on the other side just to pray for whatever you need in response to the message. Maybe there's things you need to confess. Maybe there's hurt that you need healing from. But we're going to have the band lead us in worship as we invite you to respond in prayer. Jesus, thank you again for the truth of who you are and your faithfulness. We deny you. We betray you. We're rash in the things that we do. Every single day we get it wrong. But Jesus, you're faithful. You don't sin. You have us in mind. You intercede for us. You fight for us. You draw attention away from us and back onto you. Jesus, thank you for your protection. Thank you that you're a high priest that is acquainted with our brokenness and intercedes from a place of knowing we need that intercession. And Jesus, thank you that our failure is not the final word. But as we make mistakes and as we get it wrong, that you are faithful to us. Thank you that you are able to to keep us from stumbling and present us spotless and blameless before you. Jesus, we put our hope not in our faithfulness to you, but your faithfulness to us. May you be exalted in this room as faithful, and may it change us. In your name we pray. Amen.